Welcome to the Catholic Dadcast by Rich Pintang, where we break down all things dad from a Catholic perspective. Now more than ever, we need dads to step up their game. Gentlemen, buckle up and get ready for battle. Brothers and sisters, welcome to the Catholic Dadcast. I am Rich Pintang, your host and founder, and we're excited today to have an episode on raising pure teens. That's right, prayers answered. My guest today, let's say, has a great story on his faith and being the director of campus ministry at Servite High School. Let's just say there's a lot on his shoulders to guide and lead a campus of men that are ready to take on the world. And he's a father of three, happily married for 17 years. Welcome to the show, Brother Aaron Masacaro.
Hey, good to see you, Rich. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, man. I tell you, like I said to you when I caught up with you a couple of weeks ago, for me, man, it keeps me very accountable when I can just have even short conversations with men of faith and motivating me to continue to do what I do, because and I know, the world's not going to let up. So man, I'm glad we were able to finally put this together and spend some time. What's going on in your neck of the woods?
Well, we just had Servite graduation last night. It was awesome. And, I came to Servite in February 1st of this year. So it was a whirlwind. I've told a bunch of people it was like drinking from a fire hydrant. Previously, I had been a theology teacher and also coached baseball at the high school level. And so it was a big life shift for me, but awesome, really felt called to it. And so the last 3 months have been pretty nonstop. My wife has been working from home. She's an advancement director for a Catholic high school. And also my three boys transitioned from being full-time on Zoom to going back to their school for about 2.5 hours a day. So the burden pretty much fell on my wife, and her job allowed her to stay at home, but she had some big projects going on while raising the three kids. And my boys also play baseball, so I coached 3 baseball teams the last 4 months. And I was pretty much, after I left school, I was on a baseball field for 7 days a week for 4 months. So it was awesome, but it was also exhausting. And so now we're rolling into the summer and finally have a moment to breathe. So that's why I'm on the show with you.
What a joy, man! Especially knowing that you grew up playing baseball, playing competitive baseball, and then it must be such a joy to just see the kids like gravitate towards the sport and to kind of be able to see them realize like how much you see between the correlation between baseball and life.
Yeah, absolutely. College was tough. I was a Division I walk-on and didn't get very much playing time at all. And the Lord used that time in my life and disappointments in the game to draw me to himself. And I mean, baseball and self were definitely an idol for me. So giving my life to Christ in college, there were 10,000 times I wanted to quit and walk away from the game, but didn't. But when I left college sports, I pretty much put the game of baseball down for about 12 or 13 years, and I wasn't coming back to it. It was a lot like my Catholic faith. I sort of swore it off because of disappointment and, just not turning into the athlete I wanted to. But I remember at my previous school, I was a catcher, and I saw a catcher, and I went, he's not doing that right. And so I volunteered myself to help out with the catchers, maybe once a week. But then that turned it into 7.5 years or 7 years or so of coaching as an assistant on a varsity high school team. and it was awesome. So the Lord kind of gave the game back to me, and now I'm giving it to my kids. Now that it's really no longer about me, it's about them. It's a great context to, yeah, for me, being a Catholic and, loving the game and helping kids get better at an amazing sport. So,
Yeah, that's so cool. Like, because for me, a lot of my viewers and listeners know that playing basketball was a big deal to me because that was my outlet. That's my playground, right? And
yeah.
being undersized, having the challenge of playing different positions, and then like you, I mean, for me, Aaron, I had to kind of take a step back, and I was like, I'm not as, I'm like, let me work on my career, and then I realized I started to get out of shape, and I was like, man, I love being on the court, and then to think that like, part of me wants to pass that down to my 11-year-old, but at the same time, like, it's not so much the game; it's more about like a small connection between he and I. Whether he chooses to play at the high school level. It's just, I just love
Mhm.
seeing him on the court, stumbling and tripping on his feet, and, and
Yeah.
I just love being the dad, not that typical sports dad that we always hear about, right? Because
Yeah.
we're only four games in, but I've seen it already, and
Hmm.
I'm just not that. I just don't choose not to be that dad. But
Sure.
man, three boys. Tell me about the wrestling matches. It must take a lot of patience for your wife to deal with you for for you four.
I was just talking to a friend last night. It's like, excuse me. We fight all of our battles at home, right? You see, I guess you say we see the worst of our kids at home, right? When they act like babies and they're selfish and they're fighting with each other, and it's constant bickering and battling and yelling, and we feel like we're the loudest family in the neighborhood, which we probably are. But I was telling a friend at our after graduation party last night that the payoffs in the community, right? If they are respectful citizens of their school, if they actually are working out, living out their faith in the community, if they gain the respect of other adults, they're able to hold conversations with adults actually. If they have a lot of friends that like being around them, then the payoffs in the community. So all the battles we fight and all of the discipline that we instill at home has the payoff out there. So yeah, it's a challenge. There's a lot of squabbles. There's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of crying. There's a lot of whining. I'm not gonna, you know, uh, make anything up there, but I feel like we're doing an okay job as parents because of how they are when they're out there in the world.
Yeah, amen to that, man. And you know what? It must be amazing for you to look back at and to be able to connect the dots, because to go from the walks of life that you had, putting baseball behind your faith walk, and then being tapped on the shoulder, you must feel honored to be able to be the director of campus ministry, knowing that these teens are like you said, from graduation,
Yeah,
they're walking into real life stuff.
yeah,
And I mean, you are looked at as a father figure to them. I'm sure you've had those kind of hearts to hearts with them.
yeah. Moving into this role for me has been a culmination of a lot of stuff, a lot of experiences. When I look back over my teens, my 20s, and my 30s, because I'm in my 40s now, I'm 42. Um, there were different pieces of the puzzle that I knew was the right thing at the moment, but you don't see how all the pieces of the puzzle fit together until you get to later on and you see the wisdom of God to say, I'm calling you to this position, and I'm drawing from all of those experiences to what I'm doing now. And it's amazing. Like, in fact, I interviewed just as a campus minister at Servite, and then my the assistant principal of Catholic Identity and my direct supervisor said, we want to hire you as a director. And I didn't say it out loud to him. I didn't feel like I was prepared to be a director, but based on what they saw in me, they said, yeah, you are prepared. And so in the last 3 months, I saw that I was actually more prepared for that role than I thought. And so the Lord has just affirmed me, and I'm a part of an amazing brotherhood at the high school, an amazing fraternity. That's one of the marks of the charism of the Order of the Servants of Mary that I appreciate so much. It's about fraternity, it's about Mary, and it's about service. And the Lord told me before I went, look, you're going to go and glean, and then you're going to give. And so it's just this back and forth of gleaning from Servite High School, the Servite Order, the brotherhood and sisterhood that's there, and then giving out of that. But it took a lot of experiences, relationships, and especially sufferings and hardships to get to that point. But I'm very, very thankful.
And you know, to your point, Aaron, I think that's the beauty of it, is that because you're put in that role, you know, a lot of times we have that self-doubt, and I'm sure working with high school boys and knowing that they're going through a phase where they're still trying to discover themselves, if anything, I can imagine that you're telling them, look, you guys are teens, you know, you're a creation of God, and he made you specifically the way you are. And I want you to understand that, like, I'm here, but your relationship with God is your relationship with God. And
Yeah.
and if someone's going to take you closer to the heart of Jesus, it's Mary. And the fraternity is special. Anytime I'm running into anyone that's you know, from either from Serva, you can tell, you know, you can tell the standard at which they, you know, with my daughter being 15, trust me, I'm like, hey, there's high standards. I'm like, don't lower your standards. But a lot of times when I, you know, I'm I keep it very real with her, you know, and that's really that's how I think she wants to be communicated, is just very authentic. It can be raw sometimes. I mean, the Chicago in me comes out a little bit more than maybe she wants to, but I'm like, look, I'm just protecting you from, you know, the boys that I was, you know, when I was a teenager, because we didn't have any guidelines. And I want to say that the standards at which you give to them is something that may or may not sprout until later on in life. But I think from a parent's point of view, especially a father's point of view, you know, you are that kind of that father figure. And I think what I love about what you guys do about their prayer life is you let them know, you know, men pray, and to allow them to realize the beauty of that. I mean, how do you guys go about, you know, instilling in them that prayer life?
Well, I'll say one thing. You made a comment about your daughter, and I remember I gave a talk a number of years ago. I was with teens. This was before I came back to Catholic faith. There's a whole story behind that. But the Holy Spirit gave me a great question to ask the boys that were there. And I asked all the guys, hey, raise your hand if you have a sister. So all the guys that were there raised their hand if they had a sister. And I asked them, are you the kind of guy you would let your sister date? And it was like the perfect question. You could just hear like, oh, right. So I just wanted to share that really quickly. When I'm talking to teen boys, I want them to set the standard and the bar really high, right? Thinking of, you know, if God calls them to marriage, their future spouse, right? Are they preparing for that relationship in the future? So our actions, even our thoughts now, are important. And then being protective of yourself, and being protective, especially of a woman's heart, is huge. So that should guide our dating relationships when we're in high school and college, because, you know, how many times do you date and then you don't end up being with that person for life? To answer your question about prayer, the reason I went to Servite High School, first of all, on the job description for my job, it said, the first bullet point said, loves Christ. And Servite showed me a place where Christ wasn't just there, but he was truly central, to the point where we have Eucharistic adoration on campus every day, all day. We have not once daily mass, but actually twice daily mass in the morning and afternoon. We have benediction at the end of the week. the success of the school, especially in terms of like led by the formation and theology departments and campus ministry, is centered around prayer. We just had a senior open house 2 nights ago, and there was one kid in particular who's going to Franciscan, played on the basketball team, and he and his mom and his dad went into the chapel where there was Eucharistic adoration going on for all seniors and their parents to go and be with Christ together. And he told his parents, "This is my favorite place to be on campus." When he came to high school, he didn't have it all figured out, even though he came from a pretty strong faith background. Everybody's on their own journey, but he had to grow and develop and evolve. And I can't tell you how many boys I've run into that have been so impacted by their theology teachers and their teachers in general, because there's a lot of amazing faith on campus that, their natural move was towards prayer. And wanting and building that relationship with Christ. And not even all of our students are Catholic. I mean, we have Christian, we have other kids who might identify as religious or non-religious, but they see the importance that's there. And boys are connecting to God through prayer because it's a priority on campus, and they see that modeled in the faculty and staff, So it's huge. One other thing I'll share is one senior shared on a Kairos that it wasn't going to mass that fired his faith up. It was actually service. He started to get involved in service, and then he started to attend mass more, and now he's like super on fire. So there's that interplay of prayer and service. I mean, at Servite High School, that's what we are about, or need to be about. Is it's within our name, to serve. So, but there is a deep faith, and it's awesome to connect with boys that are really way ahead of where I was when I was a teenager, because I was just trying to figure it all out, so.
Yeah, and that's, I think that's the beauty of us as dads, as men, talking from where we are, because like we're basically feeding into them, because we're still broken, and they think that like, oh, these adults have all the answers, or they think they have all the answers, but we're just prepping them to understand that like the world has no mercy, man, and there are going to be a lot of things that get thrown their way that's going to shake them. But there's no doubt, when you look at it statistically, when the father is the faith leader in the house, I'm not the math guy, but I'm going to do my part, and I feel like there are going to be a lot of dads, which is really one of the reasons why I started the Catholic Dadcast, was that I think that there's too many passive dads. That's the best way I can say it, is they're letting life happen. And there's a lot of intentionality to what we want to do for our children. I mean, if God gifted us and entrusted us with these children, you on campus and your own family,
yeah,
we should take that very seriously, because as you can see around us, there are a lot of, quote, people that say they're Catholic but have no clue what the teachings are.
yeah, yeah,
I'll leave it at that.
yeah,
But I think that's why I have so much respect for folks like yourself in education, in from the Catholic point of view, because we depend on you guys, but it starts in the home, and that's what you're living out with the boys as well.
Well, I'm extremely humbled, when you talk about dads who struggle with being passive, or maybe they're not engaged in your faith. I mean, absolutely. The statistics, if I can say that correctly, bear that out. Somebody just mentioned to me the other night, they did the link of the most famous atheists in the past 100 years, going all the way back to Karl Marx, and you think of guys like Christopher Hitchens, and the lack of a connection they had with their father. That it's pretty clear, not only statistically but anecdotally, that when the dad's not involved and not engaged religiously, the kids sort of go that way. And how many anecdotes or examples do we see where the mom is strong in faith, but the dad isn't, you know. But I'm really thankful because you and I both know God as a father is certainly not passive and is constantly pouring out his grace. I know I really don't deserve anything because I'm a recovering sinner. I want to give him truly the glory and the honor and the credit into making me in the man and the dad that I needed to be. Because when I was in college, failing in so many respects, um, and having gone through a number of challenges growing up, um, that he shared that grace with me and called me. So what I'm doing now is just a result of a call that came out of desperation, where I just knew that my parents, my family, my friends didn't have the ultimate answer for me, that it could only come from God through the Holy Spirit. And so he was just preparing me to respond to that. So since 1998, for me, it's just been the repetitive response to that call. And so everything I offer my sons, everything I offer these boys at the high school, everything I offer my wife, even my friends in the neighborhood that I live in, is just an outpouring of that grace that even if, you know, maybe our parents fail, and obviously I fail, and, you know, we fail as parents, God doesn't fail, you know, and it's all about how are we going to respond to him. So even for those dads that are out there that maybe aren't locked into their faith yet, and I like to use that 3-letter word a lot, yet, right? Because I think it kind of speaks to hope, and that no person is fully lost, that God's doing his work, whether it's through me or other men or other women or even kids, to call the hearts of men like ours. And it's up to us to respond, you know. And sometimes I think guys don't respond because they feel guilty and ashamed. You know, they don't feel like they're good enough. They feel like they're worthy. You know, other times they might deal with addictions or certain things that keep them from they're incapable, they're powerless, you know. And this could be a whole host of issues, but I firmly believe in the grace of God through the Holy Spirit, that he will keep knocking, he will keep pressing, he will keep reaching out. And until our dying day, we have an opportunity to respond to that. It's never too late. You know, it's never too late. Just, I don't know what causes a person to respond. I don't know, but I'm just glad that I did, but I still give him all the credit.
What a great testimony, brother, because I think as dads and as men in general, we do put a lot of that on ourselves. We're very self-critical. We get that doubt, we get that fear, and we know how that the devil likes to work that in there, because if they're going to break up a family, it's probably going to start with the dad, and to weaken the family unit, and that's what we see in society. And
It's
I
true.
think even more so, like with what you were saying, like we have to give ourselves that grace because we are broken. But I mean, I think one of my messages to the dads is it's okay to lay that in front of the cross and to try to surrender that, because it really takes true surrender for you to not always be having all the answers, and that you know, regardless of how hard your situation is, there are ways, but it's going to be in God's time. It's not always on your time. And I think this is like fresh in my mind because I'm often in my dad's mastermind that I'm in. I'm talking to a lot of the men that either feel like they didn't get what they wanted in their childhood from their father, absent, and they don't have the structure, or the tools, or they feel like they don't, you know, which is the beauty of having men around you. But the other part of it is that um, it's 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 in his hands ultimately. But you can see how much chaos it can cause when we as men and as fathers don't step up. And I think most of us love our families enough that we would take a bullet. You know, we sacrifice because that's what's required. And we don't always act like we're thankful, but I think we can both say that, like, because of where we've come from, we know we're indebted. Whenever we're at the cross and you're sitting at adoration, you know you're broken. But it's so important to allow yourself to have that. And I think there's a lot of pride that steps into a lot of men. And then I'm sure that you can kind of see where I'm coming from when that word pride comes in.
Absolutely. The two words that came to my mind as you were sharing that were the words real relationship. I mean, that's what we really need. That's what our kids need. You know, one thing I work hard on as a dad, I don't always do it great, but I keep working on it, is when I screw up, I need to own that before my wife and my children. You know, as somebody said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Would you please forgive me? Um, that's so important because I don't think as kids truly we expect our parents to be perfect. I don't think my kids expect me to be perfect, although that would be ideal. But when we screw up and recognize it, just to be able to own it, to be authentic, to be genuine. Working with teens, you know, I share my story in a very deep way with teenage boys because they can tell something inauthentic from something authentic. They can tell when you're
Absolutely.
genuine.
Yeah.
And if I want them to be the men that they are, then what does it mean for me to be a man? It certainly doesn't mean putting on airs or being prideful or acting like I have it all together. It means being real, sharing where I have struggled, how I've grown. I mean, just being honest, you know, and to have real relationship. That's what kids long for with their parents, you know. And so with my boys who are 11, 9, and 8, um, every day is being real with them, right? So that when they go out into the community, they can have a conversation with another adult. You know, I don't talk to them like they're babies. I talk to them like they're young men, even though they're so young. And I'm a hard dad. Like I challenge them, I discipline them. You know, I'm consistent as I feel like I can be. But I want to have a real relationship with them. And I want them when they're going through a hard time, maybe it's at school or they're dealing with, you know, they're nervous or anxious about something or they're scared about something. I want to be a safe place that they'll come and they'll share and they'll talk.
Amen.
Right. Because one of the biggest, I think the biggest challenges is that puts dads, moms, kids in a rough place is isolation. You know, when we isolate and we don't feel safe and we can't bring it into the context of relationships, starting with our parents, right? If we isolate from our parents, or we don't feel that's a safe place, or when spouses isolate from each other, I mean, we know that's where the devil just goes to work. That's a bad place to be. So it's all about bringing it into relationship, real relationship, being honest, and I and conflict is good. Like when we have tension and conflict with another person, get after it, right? And work through it with the goal of reconciliation and, you know, not breaking apart and not, you know, divorcing from that relationship, but to say we're going to come out unified in the end, no matter how long it takes or how hard it is, you know. So it's truly about being real. So I get real with teens and I tell them my story and the ins and outs because I want to raise the bottom for them to give them a chance of, if God calls them, to be a great dad someday, a great husband. And for any of those other ones who are perhaps called to maybe serve in the priesthood or the religious life, that they'll be real and open and honest with their flock and have a great ministry. So,
Brothers and sisters, we're here with Aaron Mascaro, the director of campus ministry at Servite High School. And you know what, we're just talking about how it is and how challenging it can be to raise pure teens. But man, I want to say that, you know, and we may have referenced it before, but today's day and age, the dangers of today is just, it's at a totally different level than what we're used to. And I think just knowing that the attacks can come from so many areas, it can be kind of scary. And I think ultimately and I've said this to not only, my daughter, but also those young adults that are, making decisions. I've always told them, look, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. We all make mistakes. Just don't make the big mistakes. And I think what we're saying is, you know, let God put these guardrails up for you. Let that be the standard, because, there are just some mistakes that are going to scar you, and are going to change your life, right? And I think when I'm sponsoring a lot of the kids for confirmation, I I, I'll bring it very raw to them also, and I've said in most cases adults can tell you that their biggest regrets were either something related to drugs or alcohol, something related to sex, something related to finances.
Yep.
You can almost categorize it anywhere in there. So if you can take a model like, for example, a Saint Joseph, and you can look at the virtue that he stands for, I think that's why it was such a big deal for that consecration, because it just hit me like, this is why we need strong men in this world. Men that actually act like gentlemen, men that actually understand how to treat a female, you know, guys that understand how to take care of the queen in their household, because where are they learning all that from? And the kids are going to say, either see a healthy relationship, or they're going to learn from what they see on TV or social media. And kind of going back to your comment, Aaron, about isolation, uh, we just don't know, especially with electronic social media and technology. So for them to understand that sometimes it's desensitizing them, and then before you know it, they're involved in something that they shouldn't be. But I'm sure that's a very strong topic that you guys minister around on campus.
Well, I think we are aware, as those who are serious about our faith, we're living in a society and in a country where we're seeing the results of um, God being less and less involved, invoked, relied upon, right? There's obviously like privatization of religion, but with the challenges we see, whether it's politically, morally, ethically, that make it or that are making it more and more challenging, I think, for us to live out Catholic faith and realize there are going to be some lines drawn in the sand. Um, we see the natural consequences of that. And as a campus minister at an all boys high school, I knew going in, the biggest area that I would feel would be like most essential in a ministry to young men has to do with sexuality. Um, because one of the great scourges of humanity right now is just the proliferation of pornography. And it's also, we talk about how I think statistics show now that teens they're actually in the physical way, they're less sexually involved than maybe we were growing up in the 80s and 90s. And there's more, but there's this just bastion, this like nonstop barrage of opportunities they can have with online interactions that are perverse, that are evil, that are damaging, that are addicting, right? And so it's taking us out of the context of being able to have real relationships. And the statistics are showing that kids on average are exposed to pornography at the age of 8, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, which is, a little earlier than maybe when you and I were kids growing up. But it's doing so much damage that, like, trying to get a hold of that and strategies and having real conversations. And when I talk to teens, it's like, looking at it like a science experiment in terms of I don't want them feeling a ton of guilt and shame, although those are real emotions and experiences that we have when, for instance, teens that are trying to live pure and holy. But like trying to go back and unpack, what were you thinking? What were you feeling? Right? If they struggle in the area of porn or something like that. So so they can break it down and understand the why, right? Why do we go to certain things to maybe cope with our life, make ourselves feel better? And especially within the last year or so, being in quarantine and going through COVID, I mean, it just promoted more isolationism, right? I talk to teens about, um, the acronym HALT. When I'm hungry, when I'm angry, when I'm lonely, when I'm tired, right? I would throw a B in there for boredom, right? For teens, especially boys that want to grow in the area of holiness and sexual purity, what are your triggers? You know, when do you struggle? So really kind of breaking it down and then being able to look at themselves from the outside in objectively. But it's just a battle because it's just overwhelming. I mean, I heard a number of years ago the adult film industry makes more money a year than all of the four major sports entities combined. And that's scary, right? And a lot of people don't know the stories of these people that work in the industry and how dark and scary and how it leads to uh, just a terrible ending. For many, it leads to death, it leads to drug addiction, it leads to, right? They don't see what that life leads to. And so you pull back the cover on all of that and expose it for what it is, it makes it a whole lot less appealing. But it's all a part of this world system of lies that works really, really well, and then until it doesn't. And so I know in ministry among teens, especially boys, this is a huge area. um, if I could recommend to any viewer that might be listening right now, pick up Christopher West's primer on Pope John Paul II's theology of the body. And then once you get through that, go by the theology of the body. Because St. Pope John Paul II, what he said starting in 1979 and now continuing into the modern era that we're living in, I mean, his words are so relevant. An understanding of the human person. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? There's so much confusion, right? I mean, how many genders do we have now that society says 68 genders? I mean, I'm sorry, it's ridiculous to the point where I don't even like using the term gender. I like using the term sex. We're either male or female. Um, and what he has to say about theology of the body, who we are as men and women, and how we're supposed to relate to each other and understand our sexuality and how divine and how intimate and how important that is and how to express that properly. We really need to do our hard work of letting that theology sink into who we are. But that's a problem because we live in a very busy, fast-paced world, and we don't have time to do the hard work, right? We don't have time to read. We don't have time to really think through it. And so we do what we can. And that's an excuse. We shouldn't, we should still be working at it. But yeah, I knew going into an all-boys high school, this was going to be an area that not only that I wanted to address, but I was called to address, and I was able to talk about in a way that I couldn't maybe in a co-ed context where I'd come from.
Yeah, that's amazing, brother, because the fact that you can look at it and say, Lord, where can I make the most impact with what I'm going to be doing here? You hit the nail on the head, because and I know how much deterioration comes from sexuality, pornography, and all the aspects of it. So if it's that profitable, right, like we say, think about all the different facets that are involved in that, between real estate, between trafficking, between drug use, between electronics, and it's crazy to think of. And I would think that if I could have an episode just to talk about that, I would. But I think the fact that you understand that it wasn't like this before, right? But guess what? You know, if I'm a consumer, I'm gonna get them young, just like when it came to cigarettes. We'll get them young, make it look cool, right? Flavors, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they're seeing, and that's I think why men and dads, if you're listening, my plea to you is to recognize that you're not in this battle alone. But I would say that if you do nothing will change. But I would tell you that there are tons of resources. There's the church can help you. There's brothers that can guide you, but ultimately you have to be intentful and purposeful with where you're spending your time and what we're teaching our kids and how we're modeling that for our kids. I knew, and before we end the episode, I would love for you to share your advice to the men. But I think for me, I knew that I just didn't want to tell my kids about what they should be doing. I wanted them to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way I felt like I was just telling, God, consume me with this and let me live a Christ-centered life, rich in the Catholic faith, in the sacraments. And when they go and decide to make their own decisions in life, they're still your children. But I feel like I've done my part, and that the communication channels are always open. And like you said, it's about having that type of relationship where they're going to come to us and not outside of the household. But brother Aaron, before we wrap up, I'd love for you to just share some insight with the dads that might be struggling with their teens.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind as you were sharing all of that is for us as dads and men, I think the first thing we need to do is look in the mirror and evaluate ourselves. And it's not about guilt and shame. It's about honesty with ourselves before God. If there are areas that we struggle in, if there are areas that we sin, if there are areas that we could potentially be addicted, whatever that is, to get real and to be honest with that. For those who are Catholic, it maybe starts with the sacrament of reconciliation, but when we go into the sacrament, how many times have we been given advice by a priest that wasn't going to give us the full sum total of maybe what we really needed to tackle those things in our lives that are challenging? So I think we need to really evaluate. I think we need to take time in prayer and ask God to truly search our hearts. And to get into the Catholic Church, you need to be a sinner first, right? So we're accepted on the basis of pretty much the worst thing about ourselves. But there's other programs out there of recovery that will help people depending upon maybe the things they struggle with. And if you're a dad or a man that's had any struggle in a particular area where you're like, man, I got to get a hold of this area of my life, pray about what's out there, look for what's out there, and look to put yourself in a position where you're going to hold yourself truly accountable. Because the more you grow in purity, and holiness, the benefit's going to be not only for you and starting for you, but it's going to be for your whole family. One of my favorite beatitude is, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. And just as my own personal testimony, I came to realize at a certain point in my life that while I was giving my life to Christ and growing with him, after a certain point, I realized that I was looking at him really with one eye. My other eye was obstructed. And when you cover one eye, you can we don't have depth perception, right? You kind of see in two dimensions. But when God challenged me as a man and as a Christian to grow in holiness and purity, in that process, I saw that obstruction removed from that eye, and I believe I was able to see the Lord in three dimensions. And that's what my wife needed. That's what I needed. That's what my kids needed. And I thank God. So for you men out there, look, if there's an area that's nagging you, if you have sin in your life, if you have an addiction, you know, get after it, because it's only going to benefit you to kill that thing in your life with the help of God and a community. You really need to bring it into a community where people understand that issue. And the payoff is going to be for you. You're going to feel so much more peace and so much more freedom. You're going to be able to start working on those character issues that you have that are underneath the surface of that. And then the payoff is going to be the joy and the peace and the freedom that you have in your relationships. And your family members will see a difference, I promise you. So I'm grateful to God for being a severe father who calls us out. He tells us that we're good. He wants to make us to be great. That's what we say at Servite, right? God has made you good. We want to help you to become great. But he also calls you out on your junk. And that's what a good father does. And he's severe, and his discipline is hard, and it hurts, and it's suffering. But that's the kind of stuff that we need to cleanse us in purity. So, there's a whole other bunch of things I could say. As dads, we need to admit our wrongs. As dads, we need to listen to our kids and to our wife. Sometimes we need to shut up and just listen. We need to stay consistent with our discipline. Sometimes we need to change it up, right? Surprise your wife, surprise your kids, do something different, shock them, surprise them, right? Be a giver, over and beyond what maybe you normally do, and your wife and kids will love you for it. Be honest, pray, and then discern sharing your story, especially when your kids, like I think about when my boys become teenagers, how much deeper can I go talking to them of what it's like for me to be a man? And so I need to pray and discern, Lord, what do I share with my boys when they're ready? What does that look like? Because I think the more that I talk about what it's like being a human being and being a man, and they know there's no secrets, that it's like, my dad was real with me, and now I know what it means to be real. We need that. We need that kind of depth of honesty and that protection, that safety in family. So to all you dads out there, truly, truly, God bless you. Don't devolve into guilt and shame. It's not worth it, but it is worth doing the hard work of holiness in your life. And if you need any help, call Richard or find a way to connect with me, and we'll be there for you as Catholic dads.
Yeah, amen, man. And it's amazing because it's such a strong message of hope and mercy and forgiveness. And I think that's one of the beauties of the Catholic faith is, when we stumble, we can still go to confession to be cleansed and to walk a little bit more lightly, because that's really the freedom of bondage that can come with different addictions and vices. And if we can work on ourselves, imagine how much freer and lighter you'll feel working on your relationship with your wife and your relationship with your kids. I mean, you can never outgive God. And I think if you realize how much more there is there, you start to see through the lens of Jesus. And it's so amazing. But God bless you, Brother Aaron, for everything that you do. And, we would love to hear, how you guys might have implemented some of the things that Brother Aaron shared. We're going to share some different resources in the show notes that might be helpful for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, it was a pleasure having you, Brother Aaron. God bless you and the family. And to my brothers and sisters listening, we are going to continue to pray for you as we always do. And I'm thankful for everyone that prays for me and the ministry that I do through the Catholic Dadcast. But brothers and sisters, this podcast episode has ended. Go now in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Amen.
Thanks be to God.
Amen. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate it, man. This is great.
Love you, brother.
You too.